Okay, well, we can start. Hi, welcome to this first webinar, uh, which is part of the application preparation webinar series being organized by Rhodes Secretariat India in collaboration with Project EduAccess. First and foremost, this webinar is being recorded. So if you wish to appear in the recording while you ask a question, please keep that in mind. And the second is that you also have the opportunity to ask questions through the chat and Q&A functionality of this webinar. So please feel free to ask your questions there if you don't wish to appear in the recording. This is the application preparation webinar series, as I said, being organized by Rhodes India Secretariat in collaboration with Project EduAccess, and I'll speak a little bit about that in just a while. This is what we're going to do today. We're going to introduce Project EduAccess, and then I'll introduce you to your panelists today, who will then go over eligibility, the selection criteria, the process, the documents that are required, and other aspects of the application process. Briefly, Project EduAccess is a nonprofit initiative that is aimed at increasing inclusivity and representation in higher education spaces. As you know, access to higher education, leadership, and professional opportunities is a privilege that most people from marginalized communities are denied through a number of barriers, and Project EduAccess is seeking to be an attempt to remove those barriers for marginalized communities. This webinar series that I mentioned is a collaborative effort between Rhodes Secretariat India and Project EduAccess, and there are 6 webinars that we are going to organize in this series. Today is the first of those webinars, and today's webinar will focus on an overview of the Rhodes Scholarship and the eligibility and selection criteria. We're not going to speak too much into how to write your academic and personal statements or how to choose your referees and so on and so forth, because those are the subject matters of subsequent webinars, as you can see on your screen. Tomorrow, we'll have our second webinar, which will be on writing your CV for the Rhodes Scholarship. And then every weekend for the next 3 weekends, for the next 2 weekends, we will have webinars that discuss the other aspects of the Rhodes Scholarship application. So your panelists today are 3 incredible Rhodes Scholars. Daksh Walia is reading for an MPhil, DPhil in Econ, and he's a Rhodes Scholar from 2023. Ritika Mukherjee is reading for the MSc and DPhil in Neuroscience, and she is a Rhodes Scholar from 2022. And we have the most recent Rhodes Scholar with us, Ayan Gupta, who is going to read for the BCL at Oxford this fall. So without any further delay, let me hand over to Ayan, who is going to take you over the overview of this of the scholarship. Ayan.
Hi, thank you so much, Sameer. I'm very happy to be here. Great. So I'll just take everyone briefly through the scholarship. I'm sure everyone already knows what the scholarship involves, but the Rhodes Scholarship applies only to the University of Oxford, and it's a pre-admission scholarship, which means that you apply to the Rhodes before you apply to Oxford. What does it include? It includes your tuition fees, so all your fees for the University of Oxford, all your living expenses. So they pay a stipend, a yearly stipend paid in monthly installments to make sure that all your monthly costs are accounted for, health insurance, your visa expenses, and a return flight ticket. One thing to note is that the Rhodes Scholarship is a postgraduate scholarship. That is, it only applies to graduate courses offered by the University of Oxford and not undergraduate courses, with the small exception of a BA with senior status, which is in some undergraduate courses. You can, if you already have an undergraduate degree, you can still go ahead with it if you're eligible for a senior status. There are 5 scholarships every year, and there are no bar in terms of the field. However, there is a conditions of tenure document that you should look at very carefully. You can find it on the Rhodes website, which lists certain combination of courses and certain specific courses that are not covered by the scholarship. For the most part, these are very, very few courses from a large variety of courses that Oxford has to offer. And finally, it's not a need-based scholarship. So the Rhodes has a very specific criteria which it looks into and which we'll talk about during the course of this event, and it's not a need-based scholarship. So financial need is not the only basis on which the scholarship is given out. And I guess the best part is that there's no application fee, so it's always worth a try. Now, in terms of the formal eligibility requirements, there are certain requirements that the scholarship hands out for which you need to meet in order to be eligible to get the scholarship, which is distinct from the selection criteria that they give. I think you can all see it on your screens, but just to take you through it, first you must be a citizen of India. They usually will ask for your passport to show that you can meet this requirement. So it might be a good idea to get your passport in order in case it's still under process or if you haven't applied for one. Um, the second thing is that you must have undertaken your studies, including your at an educational institute in India for a minimum of 4 of the last 10 years. So this includes either your undergraduate study or your 10th and 12th from school. Either of these should have been undertaken in India in the last 10 years for a minimum of 4 years. There is also an age requirement. You must be aged 18 to 23 on 1st October 2024, with the exception of older for there's a specific exception for older candidates, which essentially says that you must be under the age of 27 on 1st October 2024 in case you have completed the academic requirements of your undergraduate degree on or after 1st October 2023. So this is to account for candidates who have started their studies late, or in cases of universities where the graduation happens slightly later in October. Finally, before you must also finish your undergraduate studies by July 2025 with an academic requirement that meets or exceeds the entry requirement at Oxford. For most courses, the entry requirement at Oxford is a British 2-1 degree or a first. And Oxford has a specific page that you can look at to figure out what it translates into in terms of Indian universities and grades. Now, in terms of the application process is in 4 stages. The first is a written stage, which is what we're concerned, which is what I'm sure all of you are going through right now. And then there'll be 2 or 3 interviews, depending on the number of candidates and the discretion of the selection committee. Now, at the written stage, you require a bunch of documents that you need to provide. Your official transcripts. This includes transcripts for your 10th and 12th and your undergraduate education. So if you haven't finished your undergraduate degree, you'll have to provide a provisional transcript for the time being. You must also submit a CV, and I think it cannot exceed 2 pages. Please take a look at the Rhodes candidate information for details on how the CV needs to be structured. And I think we have a session tomorrow as well on that. A personal statement of 1,000 words, and there are specific prompts that have been given this year for you to look at. An academic statement of 350 words, which talks about the courses that you want to pursue at Oxford. Reference letters from your professors, and of which at least 3 need to be academic and at least 1 needs to be a character reference. And finally, you might, depending on your course, have to show eligibility. You might have, depending on your course, have to give any of the English eligibility exams like TOEFL or IELTS. They're not required for the scholarship, but in case you are required to give them, now would be a good time to give them because the scholarship selection concludes in November, and with many of the deadlines being in early December or early January. So it might be a bit of a rush at a later stage to give them. So it might be a good idea to give them right now. If you get through the written stage, then there are a bunch of interviews that happen. There's a preliminary interview that happens, and then depending on the selection committees, which they might, depending on the selection committee, they might hold a penultimate interview, and then there's a final interview. This brings us to the so what we've covered right now was the eligibility criteria, and now we have the selection criteria, which is what does the Rhodes Selection Committee look for in terms of an application and a candidate. And they have 4 requirements. The first criteria is academic excellence, and what this usually means is that as a minimum, you must have a first class and honors undergraduate degree. The second is the ability to use one's talents to the fullest, as demonstrated by sports, music, debate, dance, theater, artistic pursuits, including showing teamwork. The third criteria is truth, courage, devotion to duty, sympathy, and protection for the weak. And fourth is moral force of character and instinct to lead. I think we'll go through most of these criteria one by one, and all of us will also just have a small discussion on how we interpreted each of these criterias. But something to note is that all four of them are looking at very distinct things within distinct aspects of your personality, ranging from academic excellence to being able to sustain yourself on a long-term basis, which is the second criteria, energy to use your talents to the fullest, to moral force of character and leadership. I'll quickly talk about the first criteria and then pass on to Ritika to take you through the rest. Um, the first criteria, academic excellence, obviously looks at your grades, but it is a lot more than your grades in terms of the fact that it's asking you to demonstrate an ability and an interest in being able to academically engage with areas of interest that you claim you're interested in. So does it mean that you should have good grades? Yes, but is that enough? No. There's a lot of ways in which you can show it through your reference letters, through your personal statements, through your work, such as your as a research assistant or a teaching assistant. But I guess the idea broadly is to be able to communicate to the selection committee that you are able and interested in being able to read and write at a postgraduate level, and that you have the interest in doing so. Something to remember is that the University of Oxford has given very specific requirements for each course. So please take a look at whether your course requires a first class degree or whether it requires an upper second class degree. And also take a look at Oxford's conversion page, the link of which is given in the PPT, and I'm sure will be shared with you, which takes you through what grades within the Indian system translate into and how they translate into the UK system. Yeah. Ritika, over to you.
Thank you, Ayan. Now let's go through the rest of the criteria. The next one, also quite important, is character, which comes under the phrase of energy to use your talents to the fullest. Now, this can be very personal, depending on what are the things that you like doing apart from your academic work. For example, things like sports, music, debate, dance, theater, any kinds of artistic pursuits, including those where teamwork is involved. And you can highlight these kinds of pursuits in your CV or in your personal statement. These don't have to be limited to your college or your academic institutions in the past, but can be from many different places, your cultural engagements, musical, sporting accomplishments, and so on. It doesn't always have to be that you have gotten medals in these different kinds of things or won competitions. Even if you've had a sustained interest in some specific hobby or activity and you're able to demonstrate that interest in your personal statement or writing and talk about how it shaped you as a person, that is also enough. So don't try to don't be intimidated by the fact that a lot of people, maybe a lot of scholar bios you read online, might say that they are Olympians and so on. So please talk about anything and everything that you're interested in. And if at any point in these different activities you've worked as part of a team, you've helped lead it, or have just been and or have just enjoyed the teamwork involved, then highlight the things that you learned from it and how it may or may not have fed into your academics and future aspirations. Next criteria is a commitment to service. So the selection committee is usually looking for people that have characteristics of truth, courage, devotion to duty, sympathy for and protection of the weak, kindliness, unselfishness, and fellowship. While these may be really big words and big ideas, a lot of us in our day-to-day lives do engage with these thoughts and these kinds of principles in some way or the other, small or big. So you can demonstrate this by mentioning if you were involved in some sort of student group or voluntary work in your community or even political activities that are able to show your passion towards making a change around you that affect the people around you. This feeds well into the prompt of self, other, and the world, which you would be given for your personal statement. And that is a good place in which you can articulate your commitment to service. We'll talk more about the personal statement and this idea of self, other, and the world going ahead. You can talk about anything. So if you were a part of a group, a volunteer organization, if you were part of even thinking about or ideating for something you want to start going ahead, even that is fine. It's just very personal, very it surrounds you and your thoughts. So don't try to model this over what you read or perceive from online images of other scholars or people who've done this before you. And then the fourth criteria is leadership. So if it says that you have to have a moral force of character and instincts to lead and to take an interest in their fellow human beings. Now, this prompt is related to the previous one, and both can be demonstrated through similar examples, anecdotes. So there's not always a very clear distinction between all the different prompts. They come together in some ways or the other and can be demonstrated through similar instances. And it's important to realize here that leadership can take many forms. Within the Rhodes community, we're told that there's no one way to lead, and that really applies here well. So you can demonstrate what it means to you and explain it through an anecdote, through something on your CV that may not be obvious when you've written it on your CV, but when you actually performed your role in that position, you can talk about it in your personal statement. It doesn't have to be something huge. Even small initiatives that were meaningful for your application, for shaping you as a person, are good enough or important enough. And successful candidates are able to make a convincing case for how they would use the knowledge and skills they acquired through the scholarship to continue making a positive change in society at local, national, or global levels. So it doesn't have to be really huge or global to begin with. It's something that talks about your leadership skills at the moment. Now I'll hand it over to Daksh to take you over a few general tips for doing the applications.
Yeah, thank you so much. So when it comes to the application, as Ritika already pointed out, there is no one way of writing the personal statement. And what is important is to build a narrative, because this personal statement is mainly just a narrative about your life. And it's really helpful to give anecdotes, give certain experiences from your life. So, for example, when you're talking about your ability to use your energy to the fullest, right, it could involve a lot of things. It could be sometimes that you weren't doing five things at once, you were doing just one thing, but you were tackling a challenge within it. Or maybe some other circumstance. For example, for some people during COVID, they were simultaneously doing studies and also like volunteering with different organizations that were working for relief work during the pandemic. So those are just instances which you can cite to sort of give an idea of how you fit into these four characteristics. And it's not that it has to be like four paragraphs where you're addressing each one of the bullet pointers. Take them as guidance points and try to think about if and like effectively what story you can tell about your life, which would sort of fit into those rather than specifically picking out each pointer and giving an explanation of how you fit into that. Uh, the Rhodes statement is a very introspective piece. You would be required to think a lot about your experiences, about your passions, about your motivations, and reflect on that in the essay. And it is also supposed to be very broad. So, for example, even when you say that, for example, the first criteria of trying to use your energy to the fullest, you don't necessarily need to have, say, done sports. You don't necessarily need to have done theater or some artistic piece, right? Uh, as we've already mentioned, you just need to have an interest and to show that you have a demonstrable established interest in those things. And even if you don't have them at all, for example, when I had applied, I was working already with college, and so I did not have a lot of extracurriculars at that point. But I had other things. And so as long as you can show that you have this passion within you to do a lot of things, and to just, keep trying to do things, that's enough. And in that sense, all of these criteria are designed for you to interpret. You don't need to stick to one interpretation. If you want to spin a story about your life where you sort of interpret them according to whatever you feel is the best way they apply to you, that's fine, and you can do that. Yeah, and yeah, so yeah, can you move on, Samir? So if you look at these three ideas, this is essentially the framework in which it is best for you to write the essay. There are three parts to this. There's the self, others, and the world. Again, it's not that each part of this has to just become like one third of the essay, but it's just about when you are creating your essay and when you're thinking about your essay, this is how you can reflect on your experiences and see how they fit into how you were affected as a person. So things like how challenges affected you, how you grew through challenges, what things you learned from different challenges, then how yourself has interacted with the world. So one of the main questions that I think everyone is supposed to answer, and we were too, was how would you want to use your energies to address, pressing humanitarian challenges? And the answer differs for everyone. There is no fixed answer. Depending on the discipline you are in and the discipline you want to work in, this can vary massively, right? This can vary from, say, somebody working on cancer medication and cancer treatment to someone else working on inequality, someone trying to ensure legal justice, even someone trying to improve access about, like, say, sports facilities in India, right? So it's really up to your interpretation of what you want to work on, and just how that passion of yours and how that motivation of yours relates to the world you're in and the surroundings around you. And the last thing is the others. And in that sense, this question mainly pertains to how others in the Rhodes community would be interacting with you and how you hope to learn from them. So what things do you think? So the Rhodes community is quite international, and you would meet a lot of people from very, very different contexts, from a lot of different countries, who are also studying very different things, and that helps you learn a lot. So what do you think you can learn from those experiences and gain from those experiences, as well as how your positionality and your perspective contributes to that community? And so, in this framework, again, this is just the motivation. The last two parts are just the motivation of applying for roles, right? Others and the world primarily pertain to why do you want to apply for Rhodes and what do you think you can gain from it. The part about self is very related to the other four characteristics that we've already talked about, where the experience that you talk about inevitably will end up showing qualities like leadership, qualities like caring for others, qualities like having the passion and energy to do a lot of things. So these are again just like broad frameworks to think through, uh, but you don't have to necessarily force yourself down to talking about everything in some say, like there's no fixed word distribution. For example, like in my essay, I remember the others and the world part probably was like the last one fourth, and most of it was the self. But within that, then you can always discuss a lot of things. So there's no limitation. Sami? Yeah. And when it comes to trying to find information about the scholarship, and if you have any confusions about the scholarship, this is the main website, the official website, where you can find the information for candidates. Sami, I think we have a slide, right, with the three documents. Yeah. So these are the three main documents that you would find there. A lot of other information is also available on that website, but the three main things are these. The conditions of tenure just tell you what, if you're selected as a scholar, what you would be entitled to, what kind of courses you can do. So that's just essentially formal information about that. The guidance for referees, we will have a session on choosing referees and it will be discussed further there. But this just helps, this is for you to send to your referee and say that this is how you should write my reference letter. But it is also a good document for you to go through yourself, because it helps you understand who it is who can effectively uh, speak to these qualities for you, right? So, who in your life, what professors do you think would be best able to reflect on these qualities? And the main document for you will be information for candidates that has all the important information that is put out, which includes, say, things like deadlines, what your requirements are, eligibility criteria, all of those things. And in addition to these formal documents, which you should definitely go through, there is this informal document that has been created by people who have gone through the road selection process over the years. So this is basically scholars thinking about what tips were very beneficial for them, or what tips they would have liked to have when they were going through the process, and just putting them down for people's benefit. So this is, I think, collected over many, many years now. And I'm not sure how many, but at least 3 to 4 years, probably more. And this has a lot of valuable information, and at least in my case and most other people's case, this becomes the most invaluable guide, because a lot of questions you would have, you can always reach out to the people from the Rhodes Trust or anyone else who can help you. But this document very often answers most important questions. Thank you. Samir, do you want to come back?
Yes, no, thank you so much, Ayan, Daksh, and Ritika, for going over the eligibility criteria and the selection criteria and different aspects of the application process. I just wanted to speak very briefly once again about the age criteria before we have a moderated discussion on the selection criteria. We don't want to spend too much time on the formal things of, how to get a passport and all of those things. We hope that you will be able to figure out those on your own, and we would want you to use this time and opportunity to ask questions about how to basically fulfill the 4 Rhodes criteria that are outlined in the document. The age criteria does confuse people from time to time, but it's a very simple one, right? The criteria is, first of all, are you aged 18 to 23 on 1st October 2024? That's to say, you must have been born after 1st October 2000 and before 2 October 2006. If that applies to you, you don't need to think of anything else. You're eligible, right? So if that's the case, if you're born between 1st October 2000 and 2nd October 2006, you're eligible and you don't need to think of any other age criteria. Now, in case you're not within that bracket and you were born before 1st October 2000, right? Then you first have to see, when did you finish your first degree? And that will be your undergraduate degree. It does not matter whether you have 2 masters or 3 masters. When did you finish the first undergraduate degree? If you finished your first undergraduate degree on or after the October 1st of last year, so last year, 1st October 2023, if you finished your degree on that date or after, then you have the later age criteria, which is the age of 27. If you finish your undergraduate degree anytime before the 1st of October 2023, you're not eligible at all, because the age criteria of 18 to 23 applies. I hope that is clear. But if it is not, a lot of information about this is available on the Rhodes Scholarships website, and I would encourage you to go over there. And there is an eligibility check tool that you can use to figure out whether you are eligible or not. Wonderful. Before we take questions, I wanted to just have a moderated sort of conversation between the 4 of us on the 4 Rhodes Scholarship selection criteria. And as Daksh mentioned, the unofficial guide is extremely helpful for these things, because as once again, he mentioned that, it contains this collective wisdom of scholars for many, many years. And I can confirm, as a very, very old Rhodes scholar, it has been there for at least 7 years. That's the time when I applied. So let's go with the first, the criteria which pertains to academic excellence. Now, obviously, all these 4 criteria are written in a way that they're broad and that allow for a variety of ways to approach them, right? So the first thing that I would like everybody to understand is that you don't need to worry too much about the wording of those criteria. You don't need to think, oh, what does moral force of character now mean, and go to a dictionary and figure out how best you fit that. You should get the essence of the criteria and then see how your sort of profile fits that. So let's talk about the first one, which is, broadly speaking, academic excellence, right? Now, Ritika, you spoke about that a little bit, or was it Ayan? Whoever, any of you, if you want to go ahead, please start. Maybe we can start with Ritika and then Ayan and then Daksh.
Yeah, so the first thing in that is definitely to make sure that you fit the eligibility minimum course requirements for your the degree in Oxford that you're interested in applying for. So first step, go to the course web pages for the 2, 3, how many ever courses you're interested in, and see that you fit what is required. Now, to do that, it might be a little confusing because the scoring system in your undergraduate or master's institution may not exactly match the UK system. In that case, there is a website within the University of Oxford web pages where you can see what the international qualifications are and how they match with your minimum course requirements and what you have in your institutions. So yeah, do that. And then in case you have any doubts, then you should always email the course coordinator or point of contact given on the course webpage itself. So say you want to see whether you're eligible for a master's in neuroscience and you're not sure whether your academic credentials are enough, you write to them on the email given on the webpage and they will get back to you. If not, just send a small reminder in a week's time perhaps, but usually they get back quite promptly. So this is a question I get a lot about eligibility, and this is the best way to solve it. Just reach out and ask your doubt.
Yeah, so to carry on from what Ritika said, it's also important to remember that so the your formal eligibility for the course and the scholarship in terms of what your grades are required are one thing, but also not to leave the academic excellence criteria at that. Your grades and transcripts will go a long way in showing that, but it is always helpful through your reference letters and through your personal statements to talk a little bit more about your academic interests, how have you explored them, and to give the selection committee evidence of being able to sort of engage with the kind of work or work you do or your interests that are at a level that shows potential to succeed at a graduate level course. Right. And so one way of doing is through your reference letters, right? So in having clear conversations with your professors that, okay, I I'd like you to highlight these aspects of my skills or my capabilities or these aspects of my engagement with you. Another way is to talk about it in your personal statement in terms of in terms of more academic uh, activities that you might do, like being a teaching assistant or a research assistant, but generally to just be able to show the committee that you are interested and able to pursue postgraduate education and read at slightly higher level or than your undergraduate education. That'll always be a good way to show academic excellence. Yeah. Over to Daksh.
Yeah, I mean, most of the things have been covered. The conversion will be very helpful because all of your universities will have a completely different setup. But even if you're not able to find something there, you can always try and reach out to either the Rhodes Trust, but better so you can probably also just reach out to the Oxford University, because there are cases where they have already figured out how to convert a university's degree system in the past, that but it's just not published because like they keep getting applications from different systems, so they do have like an internal database where they'll keep updating this. And the other thing is, yeah, like, oh, for the qualifications, one question that is coming quite often is about English requirement. For that also, at least in my experience, if you're able to get a certificate from your college which says that you did your undergraduate studies in English, that generally, at least that when you are applying to Oxford, should be fine. And Rhodes doesn't require that at all. So you don't need to do it for Rhodes. And even for the Oxford application, you can either give the IELTS between the interview or the application, or even if you get this certificate and just give that, if they still require IELTS, they'll just ask you for it later. So I would like, there are a lot of questions about that. I would say not, don't worry about that too much. And yeah, for academic requirements, what always helps is uh, making sure that you are also getting references from professors whose courses you did well in, because those would be the ones who would be able to speak best to your ability to do well in uh, academics at Oxford. So that also helps sort of signal academic excellence.
Excellent.
I want to add one more thing, Samir, on the question of academic excellence. Sometimes, and I see a few questions about this in the chat generally, you might want to switch from one field to another, or you did your undergraduate or master's education in something that's a little broad, and then you want to do something that's specialized at Oxford, a master's or a PhD, whatever. In that case, for example, looking at me, I did my undergraduate degree in zoology, and now I'm studying neuroscience, which is a little bit different, which is a little bit, it's related, but still sort of a pivot. In that case, don't be scared. In your application, in your personal statement, academic statement, highlight the courses in your undergraduate degree that influenced your decision or your thoughts of changing or pivoting. Second thing is, it is totally fine to do something that's a little different from what you've done before, as long as it fits well into the story you're telling in your personal statements through your CV and so on. Of course, there will be a few courses that you should have done before at some point, either in high school or in your undergrad, that are required for a better understanding of postgraduate education in the new field that you want to enter. But even if you can slightly demonstrate your interest in the new field that you want to enter through other kinds of courses you may have done in some sort of certification on the side, something like that, that is also good. So don't discount yourself of those kinds of qualifications that you may have gotten. And again, if you do have a doubt about this, like I did, reach out to the course coordinators. As early or as late does not matter, but don't be in doubt about this.
Excellent. Thank you. So the first criteria, the first selection criteria, which is academic excellence demonstrated by literary and scholastic attainments. This is the criteria for the Rhodes Scholarship. The Rhodes Scholarship is for the University of Oxford. So whatever course you seek to apply to at the University of Oxford and you seek to study at the University of Oxford, you need to meet the eligibility criteria of that course, right? And different courses have different requirements. So the first thing for you to figure out whether you meet this criteria of the Rhodes Scholarship is to see whether you meet the eligibility criteria of the course that you want to study at the University of Oxford. So that's the first step that you should do. Check the course website, see what the eligibility criteria is. And if you have any questions about conversion of your degrees, etc., try and get in touch with the university or the course coordinator, as Ritika mentioned. So you get a good sense of this. But more generally, you don't have to worry too much about conversion. It's helpful, but you don't have to get stuck there. If you think you have a first class degree from India, you are very likely to be eligible. Now you're meeting the eligibility criteria. Then you have to demonstrate excellence for the Rhodes Scholarship, right? Now that happens through a variety of ways. You can have research papers, or you can have internships in relevant fields. You can have conferences, workshops, etc. Anything that is academic, for that matter, is going to help you demonstrate that you fulfill the first criteria of academic excellence. And as all the speakers mentioned, one of the good ways to demonstrate that, in addition to your transcripts and your CV and everything else, is through your letters of recommendation, because your professors are going to be able to comment in a much better way how you fulfill this criteria. So that's the first criteria of academic excellence. The next three criteria are related to each other, right? So Rhodes should be seen more generally as a scholarship that focuses on academic excellence and other overall aspects of an individual. So academic excellence versus all of these things. The academic excellence part we have spoken about, and now the next three criteria are: one is the energy to use an individual's talent to the full. The third is commitment to service, and then there is the leadership part of it, or moral force of character. I would like Ritika, Ayan, and Daksh right now in this instance in the reverse order. So perhaps Daksh can go first to to explain or share his experience of how he navigated those three criteria in the in his application.
Okay, yeah. Uh, yeah. So for me, when thinking about the application, like at first I was quite flummoxed by having to fit everything into one essay. And I was also very unsure about being able to meet certain criteria because uh, a lot of like past Rhodes scholars, for example, have a lot of sports generally. And in my case, I did not, at least at the university level. And high school, I just didn't think would be worth mentioning. So I used to play things at high school. And then for my entire college duration, I had stopped playing things. Now I'm back to actually playing. And I'm part of teams here. But like during that period, I hadn't. So I didn't mention it. And I felt like that became a limitation because I thought I would not be able to fit into some of the criteria. But eventually, what I went with was trying to be as candid as possible in why I thought I could fit into the Rhodes criteria. And for that, what I focused on was my engagement with different things. So, like with, say, protests in Delhi during COVID, small work that I had done with different organizations. And these are small things. It's not that I led necessarily, like I wasn't creating organizations or creating or creating, say, volunteer programs. And so I wasn't fulfilling leadership in that way, but I was expressing the moral characteristics by joining other people's programs and helping even friends who had NGOs and who had started things during the pandemic with their programs. And so from what I remember, they had asked me questions about that during the interview as well, that why did you not want to start something of your own? And one of the things was that I was time and resource constrained and I didn't have the capacity to do something like that at that point of time. And then they also asked me if I wanted to continue working in that space. And so I was able to respond. But the point is that even if you have an interest in the kind of work that you want to do, right, inside and outside of the classroom, both of those can be examples of your showing of moral character, right? Even the kind of work that you're doing, for example, uh, and how it relates to the world can very often be a reflection of what morals you hold. For example, in my case, it was again that what I wanted to work on was discrimination and inequality in labor markets. And so there were a lot of questions related to that and what my perspective of justice was. And so clearly, like the committee also picks up on those factors and they're okay with you expressing your interest in these things in a variety of different ways. Uh, yeah, I think that's what I have for now. I anything.
Thank you, Daksh. Yeah, so I mean, to be very honest, somewhat very similar to Daksh, I really struggled with uh, the next three criteria, but particularly the energy to use one talents to the full thing. To be very honest, for most criterias, the problem that I faced for the longest time in my application was, it wasn't only that there was such vague criterias, but also that there was a point where I was just like, okay, what do these words even mean? And how do I even go about trying to give meaning to them? But I guess the simplest solution I sort of found to that was to first think of a narrative and a pitch for myself that works, and then make the criteria work around that pitch. So for instance, very similar to Daksh, I used to play tennis, but it was always a recreational thing, and I've never played it competitively ever, neither in school nor in college. Um, and to be very honest, it wasn't something that I was finding space to fit in. So I then decided to give up on that and instead focus on some of my work and talk about how because my work was more sociology and empirical research based and not usually things that lawyers do. I use that to talk about, for instance, how it demonstrates energy and the fact that okay, I'm interested in therefore putting in the effort and energy that requires in the long term to learn new skills that otherwise as a lawyer I'm not expected to, or perhaps not easy for me to learn. And so that was one thing, right? Is a very reflective look on your work and being able to find space for the criteria within your work and your experiences. In terms of the other especially the leadership one, the fourth criteria for moral force of character and instinct to lead. Like Daksh mentioned, very similar. My focus was more on instances of leadership necessarily as against specific positions or experiences of leadership. So, for instance, a lot of my work revolved around criminal justice, and so in I talked about being able to talk to members of my family and people within my community at home, and being able to talk about some of the relevance of my work to them and trying to convince them that okay, just because the police is picking someone up doesn't mean they're guilty, right? And to me that was a instance of leadership necessarily, but not something that one would otherwise really think of. But and so I tried and linked that to my own interest in teaching and teaching criminal justice. So that's how I interpreted that. Again, same thing. What my focus wasn't trying to look at my narrative and then trying to find a way within which in which I can reflect the criteria honestly. And I guess a major part of this was to avoid the urge to necessarily make things seem bigger than they are in an effort to try and impress, because that's usually the urge is okay, this isn't big enough, this isn't good enough, this isn't prestigious enough. And for me, like a key part of it was just to sort of avoid that urge. A lot of my work for in terms of it looking like genuinely looked like entering data on an Excel sheet for 2 of the 3 years that I did it, which doesn't is not in that sense perhaps easy to sell, but I was just trying to sort of think of its broader relevance within the demand that the scholarship criteria has for showing moral force of character or protection for the weak and sympathy. Another thing that really helps is to have like a within your narrative a core value. So for me, for instance, given my work was in criminal justice, a core value that I had was around empathy and how criminal justice systems can sometimes not be empathetic. And so having that core value drive my narrative also really helped me find A, the relevance of my work, and B, connected to the criteria around truth, courage, and devotion to duty, right? Yeah, just I think it was a process of being very frustrated about what do these words mean to taking it towards okay, I'm gonna try and find a honest and reasonable interpretation of these words within in the context that I am in. And yeah, and I think even in the interviews that is what really worked was that I was then able to pitch it in a way that uh showed the panel and through my statement that in my mind there was a coherent reading of the criteria based on the circumstances and context that I was offering them, which was much better of an exercise than trying to think of some broader meaning through the um, information given alongside the criteria. Of course, the prompts that the trust gives also really help in terms of thinking about the criteria, and those are usually a very good starting point for trying to make sense of it. Yeah, over to Ritika.
I think Daksh and Ayan have talked about this really well. Just to add on a more practical basis, if you don't do sports, I think sports has been covered, but if you're interested in music and are not a singer or not a musician, it's also fine to talk about what kind of music you're interested in and why. It can be as simple as that. So don't get flummoxed by this criteria. This is to show what kind of a person you are in general. You are much more than just your work or the practicalities of your work. There's a lot more that makes you you. So this is a chance to show that. And a lot of what makes you you is what you do outside your workplace. So anything on that may be, even if you think stand-up comedy is cool and that gives some sort of meaning to how you build your principles or values, talk about that. So yeah, just this is quite general. This is to understand you better and your interests better. So look at it from that perspective and be a little chill about it, is what I'd say.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's an excellent way to wrap up this discussion on the selection criteria. So the first bit is academic excellence. You meet the requirements of the course. You demonstrate excellence through a number of ways, and then you have this other aspect of your profile, which involves everything else except the academics, right? And you don't need to be a sports person. There are a lot of myths about the Rhodes Scholarship, and the Rhodes Trust has actually busted some of these on their website. When I applied, was perhaps the laziest in terms of sports and athletics, and I did not have any special talents of music or dance or anything else either. So it's not necessarily about those things. Those things do get picked up when you see profiles of scholars because they talk about their interests. So you might think that, okay, if you have to be a Rhodes Scholar, you have to be an opera singer, or you have to be, I don't know, I don't even know the different types of dance. So you have to be a dancer, basically, or you have to be an excellent athlete or a sports person. You don't, right? You basically have to be you, and you have to show how you fulfill the remaining three criteria in your life. Now, Ayan, for example, talked about empathy, and because his work related to criminal justice system, that's the core value that he was able to revolve his other experiences and his overall application around. So you don't have to sort of find a list of things that you tick, or am I a sports person, and do I dance, do I sing, do I do this, or do I do that? You don't need to. Have I participated in formal debates? Have I participated in MUNs and all of those things? You don't necessarily need to do all of those things. If they are there, they can be evidence of these criteria. If they're not there, there are other ways, as Daksh mentioned, during COVID, perhaps some people volunteered in different capacities, in different ways, and in different forms. And it does not necessarily have to be formal leadership for that matter. All of us do things in different ways, and all of us care for the world and for the community around us in different ways. And it's just a matter of thinking how that fits within this broader aspect of the three remaining criteria of the Rhodes Scholarship. Okay. Great. And now we'll open the floor for questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise your virtual hand, and I'll ask you to unmute. But remember that this meeting is being recorded, so if you do speak in this meeting, you will appear in the recording. There are also a lot of questions that are being answered in chat as well. A lot around eligibility criteria related to age. I'm going to put as well as your degrees. I'm going to put the eligibility checker link in chat just after I finish speaking. You can have a look at that. That's a really good tool to figure out whether you are eligible. Spend a few moments with that. Don't just press yes, no, yes, no. Spend a few moments and see, are you actually eligible or not? Because a lot of these things are clarified there, and then we want the discussion to be a lot more about the selection criteria. One of the things that I got in DM was, if a person does not have, this is something that we touched upon, if a person does not have conferences and papers and workshops and just has a normal degree, but meets the eligibility criteria of the course that they are applying to Oxford, how should that person talk about the first criteria of academic excellence? Anybody?
I can talk about this a little. So, if you're especially from the sciences and publications are a big thing where you come from or what you in the field you want to enter, you definitely do not have to have a lot of publications, a lot of published work. That is not a prerequisite at all. You don't have to have gone to any conferences. I had none of that. If you've done any kind of writing, be it for your college magazine or for some sort of an online website or even like a personal blog, that also is a good way to show that you're interested in writing about your work and so on. If you've helped organize talks in your own institution that discuss scientific ideas or discuss experiments, whatever, that is good enough as well. So doesn't have to be huge at all. And uh, so yeah, that was it, right? Conferences and publications. Yeah, so don't worry about that a lot. Use all there. These are the other things that you can talk about that kind of fit into that category as well.
Yeah, Ayan, Laksh, Brad.
Just quickly, I mean, absolutely agree with Ritika. I mean, my experience at least in for lawyers, and I'm guessing somewhat broadly for social sciences is similar. I think the expectation is not to have um peer-reviewed publications or conferences. It is only to show that um you're interested in engaging academically with whatever it is that you're concerned about and interested in. They don't expect you to be an academic already. The whole point is to go and train for it on some level, right? Or, I mean, not necessarily be an academic, but to get that kind of training and to get that kind of environment at Oxford. So that's not an expectation. If even asking your professors to talk about your contributions in class or your ability to understand certain concepts or your ability to problematize certain concepts is a good enough way to show academic excellence and that kind of interest. So yeah, like Ritika said, I wouldn't worry about those things too much. Daksh.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly covered. Like, it helps add in showing your interest, but then if you have a paper that you wrote for, say, some course in your college, that also helps show the same thing. So you don't need to chase it. If you have it already, put it down. It definitely is helpful. But it's by no means a requirement because, yeah, as Bayan and Ritika have said, it's uh for you to learn and for you to grow into these things. And most like research, say, done at the undergraduate level is in most cases just for yourself. It's not going to become massive contributions to the field. It's for you to learn research. And that you can show in many, many different ways. It could be a paper you wrote for a course. It could be some other project that you've done just out of your own interest. It could be something you submitted for a conference or a seminar. That's completely fine. As long as you're able to show that, you don't need to worry what the exact source is.
Great. The next question is that since universities mark differently, for example, Delhi University usually never gives more than 70%, and there are universities that will give you obviously more than 70 and 80% as well. How will these applications be, how will these applications basically compare with others? Will that be a disadvantage, or should we get a letter of clarification or something from the university? Anybody wants to have a go?
I can take this one. Yeah, no, so one, I think as far as I'm aware, they're also aware of that kind of context. They've been getting so many of these applications every year from students from a wide variety of university. And I think Daksh mentioned it earlier, they have their own database. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Second thing is that's precisely why reference letters are there, is to allow them to have a lot more context on your academics than beyond your transcript, which will not give them a personalized sense of your ability, capability, the context of your marks. So for instance, in my application, my university has an unofficial rank list, but I perhaps didn't have the best of ranks. And since the rank list was unofficial, I focused a lot more on having my referees talk about my ability and what's good and what's bad about my skills, as compared to say through the rank list, right? I just submitted my transcript. So yeah, anyway, I guess that kind of personalized analysis that your referees give is much, much better. And they will use that to put into context your marks. So your referees can obviously talk about the fact that while the marks might look a certain way, they reflect something else. They can still talk about where you stand vis-a-vis your cohort and stuff like that. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Yeah.
Unless anything is to be added, I'll move to the next question, which is about the number of such scholastic or literary experiences one should have. Is there a specific number of conferences, workshops, debates, or other things that one should have for this prompt? Who wants to go?
I can take it. Oh, Ritika, sorry.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Daksh.
Yeah, okay. There's no specific number. There never is. It's just about showing an interest, showing. So when you talk about excellence also, it can just be marks, it can be not marks plus two, three other different things. Uh, Generally what happens is if you have, say, at least a couple of things, it helps because it shows a sustained interest, that you didn't engage with something just once and then forgot about it. So in that sense, having say a couple of things is generally helpful. Having two to three things is generally helpful, but it doesn't need to be that like say you have 600 different debates. Anyway, when you also like whenever the CV session happens, you will find out that you only have 2 pages of CV to fill. And you know your personal statement also has certain restrictions. So there is a paucity of space, and a lot of it is going to be about prioritizing things and prioritizing information about what you think is most beneficial in signaling your ability and your motivations. And so when you talk about interests, think about what is most important in showing that this is what I'm interested in. This is what my capacity and ability is. And so whatever shows that best is what you will end up highlighting. And other things will go either to like small details in the CV or just not be there at all. And so yeah, if you have a lot of things, a lot of it will end up not going into the application anyway, or not be very important for the application anyway. And if you don't have a lot of things, don't worry about it. Even those who do have a lot will have to end up focusing on a few. So the main idea is to have a few quality things which signal both your motivation and ability. You don't need quantity for the most part.
Great. The next question is there some broad weightage that is given to each of the criteria, the 4 criteria? Is one more important than the other, essentially, is the question. Ritika, you start.
No, I don't think so. I think Daksh also spoke about this a little bit when he was talking about his experiences. So because a lot of these speak to each other, it's not always that there are distinct boundaries between each criteria. So it's that I wouldn't say there's any distinction in how much you have to speak about what and how much holds more weightage. It's again how your story reflects these things is what you need to focus on. There can be a little less or a little more of any of those things, and that's fine. That's just who you are, and that's normal. I don't think there's any distinct weightage. There are some things that are necessary, though. That's the academic stuff, because ultimately you're going to apply to the university and they have some minimum requirements. So apart from that, all the other leadership, energy to use your talent to the fullest, those things are relative and depend on your story, really.
Does the academic criteria apply similarly to the DPhil program as well? Or is there a way for applicants to demonstrate that differently for a DPhil program?
Well, the academic criteria for the DPhil program will be specific to the DPhil program. That's the first thing. So that's what you have to first check. Second, a DPhil will most likely be a little bit research oriented. So if you can demonstrate some involvement in research or even interest in research, then that will help your application, I would think. And even if it means that you've tried to write a research oriented piece of text, it may not have been published anywhere, but if it exists, and if you've tried to write it for some sort of submission or an essay or a small project in your university, that is also a good thing to mention on your CV, perhaps, if it's a DPhil and a research oriented degree that you're interested in. So basically, first, seeing what the course requirements are, and second, seeing what you have done in your past that will help you show yourself to be a good candidate for that research oriented degree. So yeah, just think about it that way, and it will also be useful to mention those kinds of things in your academic statement, if you're thinking of a research oriented or DPhil degree.
Great. And as you know, you will have to write a personal statement and an academic statement of study as a part of your application. And it is in the academic statement of study that you will be required to talk about the course that you want to apply to at Oxford and study at Oxford. So if you're applying for the DPhil, then there are some additional things or like some different things that you will need to mention because you're applying for a research degree. For example, the overall the broad research topic that you are interested in that or that you want to explore in the PhD there, as opposed to if you are doing a master's. Now, there's another question. Someone mentioned that internships are also a good way to explain or demonstrate the criteria on academic excellence. Some of the internships that I have undertaken have mostly been clerical. That's to say that I have not necessarily had to do a lot of research in these internships. Should I still talk about these internships in my statements, and should I still mention these on my CV? And how do I show that these internships help me in demonstrating particularly the first criteria of the Rhodes Scholarship? And I think you had alluded to it a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess with internships, the idea, the way I approached it was just to use them to reflect on your experience and on why they are leading you towards the next step, which is a degree at Oxford, right? So for instance, in my case, like I mentioned, a lot of the work that I did was really just putting data in an Excel sheet, but it's only when I sort of towards the end of that sat back and reflected on, okay, how does this data help us? Why is it important to do it in XYZ ways and not in, say, some other ways? Or why can we not afford to be casual with how we enter that data? It's only then that the very fact that I was thinking of those questions then indicated that I'm interested in a certain kind of approach to the law, or to criminal justice, which was what my interest area was, right? So even if you haven't necessarily done the most research intensive work in those internships, the point is that exposure is leading you to build an interest in and giving you an indication that this is what I want to do as a next step. So for instance, when I was asked in an interview, okay, but look, uh, I was asked, I think, some sort of questions on um, criminology and sociological theory that I didn't know. My response was, well, the fact that I'm interested in those questions, but I don't really know how to answer them is precisely why I want to study uh, what I want to study, right? And that then speaks to how that interest was developed, how those questions arose in my mind. Yeah, so that's what I would say. So I wouldn't worry too much about the fact that there wasn't necessarily a lot of exposure to direct research. The very fact that you found yourself in those positions and you're interested in that kind of work is a good enough start. The point, like was mentioned earlier, is not that you've already become a scholar or an academic or someone who's a graduate student. The point is you're interested in that. And from your level, you're doing what is required to show that kind of interest. So you'll be good to go.
Excellent. Great. There are quite a lot of questions about the combination of courses that you can take and just the eligibility criteria for each course. Once again, there are formal eligibility criteria for this scholarship. That is, that you meet the eligibility criteria of age, for example, and your citizenship and others, right? And then there are the 4 selection criteria. The first of those is academic excellence, but it automatically includes the criteria of being eligible for the course that you wish to apply to Oxford. So all eligibility criteria, there's no separate eligibility criteria for the Rhodes Scholarship, except for the criteria that applies to your course, right? So there is no such is 70% required for the Rhodes Scholarship or is a particular GPA required for the Rhodes Scholarship. It really depends on what course you're applying to, and that is what will determine what the academic criteria will apply to you for the Rhodes Scholarship. So the best way to deal with this is to figure out what course you want to do at Oxford, check the eligibility criteria of that course on the University of Oxford website, and then come back to the Rhodes Scholarship application, right? You don't have to worry so much about the Rhodes Scholarship criteria itself before going without going into the course requirements. Okay.
Hello. Mr. Samir, I also have a question. So as I noticed that the mute option is now removed, so I technically assume that, okay, we should actually unmute and question. So is that fine if I draw like question now, or should I drop it on chat box?
No, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, so hello to all the participants over here and hello to the panel. So basically my question was, yeah, it was definitely about the LOR, okay? So the problem I am facing is I have graduated a year back, okay? So now the problem is, as of now, a lot of professors have actually left the organization from where I have studied and they have moved on in their life to some other organization, okay? Now the problem is it is really tough to get up like LOR from the professors who have actually taught me in my undergraduate. So could you elaborate, like it is a very unique case, I understand, but what should be my course of action when this happens? So that was my question. I will thank all of you to actually take part in that. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the question. I'll answer that briefly and then encourage you to join the webinar when we discuss LOR specifically. You will need academic referees for the Rhodes Scholarship, and that means that you will have to get those references from people who have taught you and graded you in your undergraduate degree, or the degree or the relevant degree that you're applying with, right? Now, it does not matter so much whether they have left the institution since or not. They can still write a reference letter for you, even if they have left the institution. Is the very basic answer to this question, and it's not unique. A lot of applicants do find themselves in a situation where the professor who taught them in the first year of the degree, by the time they graduate, that professor has moved on to another institution. So that's not a problem in itself. It's not a unique one. You can and you still have to get a reference letter from people who have taught you in your undergraduate program. If anybody has questions around the selection criteria, I would encourage you to raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm going to continue with the questions in chat. And then there is a question about chat in chat. That is, I have been a sports person. I played at the district level, the college level, as well as state level, but I do not have a lot of other experiences of leadership apart from sports. Is it fine for me to write my statements entirely around sports and how sports has been a very important part of my very important part of my profile? Anybody?
I can,
Yeah.
I think it should be okay. I mean it making your, because it's a narrative that works for you, it should absolutely be okay. Obviously, you will still have to demonstrate the academic excellence criteria. But that doesn't mean that because sports has been a major part of your life, you're at a disadvantage. In fact, being able to craft, as long as the narrative is personal and shows and engages with the selection criteria it's given, I wouldn't think that the subject matter by itself would be any reason to worry about. Yeah, that's how I would approach it. Ritika, Daksh.
Yeah, no, I
Ye-
agree with you.
Yeah, I wasn't completely sure, like, if so you don't need academics to the extent that uh like academics are required for the Oxford criteria, not just the Rhodes criteria. But yeah, as people have pointed out, like it's not that you can't frame your essay around sports. I think I do know of someone who talked about their passion for sports and how the degree they wanted to study was very related to their passion for sports. And yeah, so the entire essay was framed around that. And you can do that, but you still need to somehow motivate why being at Oxford doing a specific degree is useful for you, right? Because if your passion for sports is such that you want to actually just pursue sports, then being in an academic space would not help you a lot. But if it's that you are very passionate about sports and you want to do something like, I don't know, even sports law or sports injury or any field like that, then that's perfectly fine.
Great. Griti?
Hello, hi. Thank you. So actually, I have my questions. I do meet all the eligibility criteria and everything. My only question is, I did my master's in the UK and I've been here for over 3 to 4 years. So is that gonna be an issue? Because I did my undergraduate and my 11th, 12th standard in India. I do have an Indian passport, and I'm trying to pursue my PhD over here at University of Oxford. So I'm still eligible.
Yes, so long as you meet the eligibility criteria, it doesn't matter whether you have a master's abroad or not. Basically, if the question is there a bar on applications if an applicant already has a degree from a country outside India? The answer is no. But there is generally a limit to the number of scholarships that are offered to students or applicants who have degrees abroad. So as you know, there are 5 Rhodes scholarships for India each year, and generally not more than 1 or 2 will be offered to candidates who already have a degree from outside of India. But it does not make you ineligible at all.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Garima?
Hi, thank you for sharing your insights. I had two questions regarding the academic domain. First is whether the conferences or publication quality matter, meaning would they be given less weightage if they're not internationally accredited or stuff like that? And second is what if the university, where the UG is done from, is not that reputable? So I'd like to know that. Thank you.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I no, I don't think that uh I think the quality matters in the sense that obviously, like Daksh mentioned, there's no point if there's a lot of articles, conferences, or papers on your CV because they're not really demonstrating something. So the quality matters in the sense that it helps you connect it to your narrative, to demonstrating your interest. But obviously, the fact that you're interested in writing something, and even if it's not the best, does help you show an interest. So as long as you're able to indicate your interest through that and other means, I wouldn't think too much about that. And I think it's been clarified in the chats. Yeah, the reputation of your undergraduate institution is not a basis for selection in any form. So I wouldn't worry about that.
Excellent. Next is Prayas.
Hello, good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Prayas. Go ahead with your question, please.
I want to do PhD through Rhodes Scholarship. So, am I eligible? I have completed BCom program in 2020 and after MCom in 2022. and currently pursuing MA Economics, and the last semester is going to held in July this year. So am I eligible for PhD through Rhodes Scholarship?
Thanks, Press. Press, if you meet the eligibility criteria of age, then I don't see a reason why you wouldn't be eligible, irrespective of the number of master's degrees that you have. So just check the eligibility criteria around age and see if you meet that criteria. You will need to be between ages 18 and 23 as of 1st October 2024, which is this year. If you meet that criteria, you are eligible and you can apply for a PhD at the University of Oxford through the Rhodes Scholarship.
Okay.
Siddharth.
Hi, thank you so much for the session and for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. I had two questions. So one is, I'm from an integrated master's program which does not offer a BA as part of it. So it's just an MA. I don't have a BA degree. So does that kind of does it mean that my master's degree is treated as an undergraduate degree, or how does that work? That's question number one. And the second question is, when I'm talking about my second question is, can I combine a 1-year degree and a 2-year degree when applying? Because I looked up the eligibility criteria and it only seemed to indicate that I can combine 2 1-year degrees in terms of masters. But can I combine a 1-year and 2-year degree? Is that allowed? Those are my two questions. Thanks.
Go ahead.
If you have an integrated BA, MA, or just MA, that's totally fine. It will be taken as an MA, but if it's an integrated program from the institution that administers it, there should not be any problems. It's just the way your course is structured, and that's fine. And you can apply for a 1 and 2-year program, but focus on the first year in your application, I think, and you can indicate your interest in the other program as well, but focusing on the first one in the application would be the best course of action in my mind.
Great.
Hello.
There's a question.
I'm sorry to
Hi.
disturb. You can take that question forward. Perhaps I'll ask after that question.
Sorry, go ahead. You can ask your question.
All right, thank you so much. My question was, say for example, I enroll myself in a degree from an open university or something. Would that be okay? Like, would that face any challenges as compared to a degree which would be like a full-time offline in campus or something like that?
I'm not really sure about your question, but if any of the panelists have understood that and want to go ahead and answer, please.
I think the question is about instead of say a in-person traditional bachelor's, you're doing an open university degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think there is any bar on that. It does create challenges with respect to getting references. Because in open university settings, that's generally more difficult. So that would be a problem as far as references are concerned. But if it's an accredited bachelor's degree, at least for qualification, it doesn't become a problem. But that's the question, right? Because if your question is about additional courses done in addition to a bachelor's, then that's like a course that's completely fine. No one's stopping you. But even here, like the as long as it's accredited, it should be fine. But the only problem would be that with references, you would face some problems.
All right, thank you.
Okay, the next question is, I've done sports and music as well as theater competitively in my school days long back. I have also been doing debates and have leadership roles in my undergraduate. Currently, for the past few years, I'm focusing on research interests, academics, etc. Will this time gap be a problem, or will I need to place it somewhere briefly in my statement?
I don't think it'll be a problem. As how much space you give it in your statement depends on how much it affected you, impacted you, shaped you as a person and your interests. You can there can be many reasons why you didn't pursue it in the recent few years, one of them actually being COVID. So it will be understood. I don't think it will be a con at all. And how much space you give it is totally up to you. Again.
Great. Madiha, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Right, thanks, Olshu. I was wondering, how does a career break or a study break look like on the application? Would it be ideal to apply right after your undergrad, or is it okay if you have a break? Especially when the break is not really a sabbatical, if you're just taking your time off, how does that work?
So, one of the reasons of like most people apply immediately is because it's just easier to get references because professors are still in touch with you. It's easier to access them. It's not a barrier. So there are people who will like say do an undergrad work for a year or two and then apply. Uh, but these things become slightly more difficult. So if you're planning on taking a break, it is always helpful to stay in touch with your professors. Even if you are already in the middle of that break, just there's no barrier on that, and it's not looked down upon, especially if you've done other work like that year can be quite helpful. If you have used it in different ways to which you can then use in your personal statement to show your motivations and interests. But yeah, make sure that then the professors are still accessible to you and you can reach out to them.
Excellent. I think the next question is particularly for Ritika. There's a person who is currently doing a BSc in zoology, and they want to do a master's in neuroscience. They can't decide whether to go for a taught course, the MSc course on neuroscience, or an MRes in clinical neuroscience. And they want to know, if they do an MRes, will the Rhodes Scholarship not fund them for a DPhil?
Hi, Debayan. Thanks for the question. It is. Oh, the question went away. It was a little long. Okay, fine. I found it again. Doing a master's taught course will also give you the opportunity to do some research. So taught course doesn't always mean that there are no research components. So check out the course handbook for the master's in neuroscience. You'll actually get two research lab rotations that you can do and choose from a list of more than 100 different research projects. So if you want to integrate a little bit of teaching and quite a lot of research, actually, the MSc in neuroscience might be a good idea, because then after that, in the second year, you can actually do a DPhil, apply for a DPhil or some other course, maybe the MRes again, or anything else that you might be interested in. But if you are more inclined towards clinical neuroscience research, then perhaps the MRes is also cool. It is possible for MRes degrees to transform into DPhils as well, in which case, if not Rhodes, then your department can fund you. So I think it's a personal choice based on what kind of research you're interested in and how much of a taught component you want. If you want a little bit of teaching, then maybe the master's in neuroscience is a better idea than a direct MRes, where the teaching component would likely be much lesser than the taught master's. Hope that answers your question.
Excellent. Ragul.
Thank you so much, sir. First of all, good evening, everybody, for organizing this session. I'm a practicing advocate. So my question is, till the last month I was practicing in Delhi. So what I have suddenly done and planned is, I have very less publications on international, because though I am applying for Rhodes, I need to show my intentions to the Oxford that I'm particularly intended to do this course. So what I'm planning is not to apply this time, but fully sit for this 1 year thoroughly to publish some papers on my intended subject. That is nothing but the trade law. I want to research more on trade law, and I want to publish something. So for the next 1 year, I'm going to sit at my home and research on it. So my doubt is whether will that be a negative, because I'm I've done nothing for 1 year. Instead, I was simply publishing papers, researching, etc. So will that affect my selection criteria? And there are one more question along with it. The another question is, I have already some publications in public international law. So with these publications, can I apply for the trade law in Oxford? So that is one another question. And thirdly, so thanks. That's also I've learned my question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So I don't think it'll affect you negatively, but one, because you're taking the time off that you want in terms of sort of pursuing your interest. That said, mentioned earlier, by itself, as I'm guessing you're planning to apply for the BCL. As far as I understand, the BCL per se is pretty strict in terms of their what they look for in students is largely the academic criteria, which is whether you have a first class honors degree. And yes, it'll help you in terms of having publications to perhaps show that, but by itself, it's not necessary. And same with the scholarship itself. Publications by themselves aren't necessary, so you don't need to um, uh, only do it for the purposes of ticking off a box. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. As long as you have an interest and you can show it, you'll be good to go. Um, uh, and I'm sorry, can you just repeat your second question quickly?
My second question was, I have some publications of on the subject public international law, but now I through this 1 year of practice, I have concretely decided to pursue on the trade law. So whether with this international law publications, can I apply for this trade law?
Yeah, because yeah, that shouldn't be an issue. One, because obviously the way the BCL is structured, it's a generalist course, so you can choose to take courses across a wide range of subject matter. And what they ask for is they will ask for a written sample, and that's largely to just check your ability to research and write. So by itself, the fact that your publications are in international law, that your written sample is concerning international law should not be an issue at all. And the second thing is because I mean, obviously, because international law and trade law are also quite connected, I wouldn't worry too much. I wouldn't think that you're very far away from what you would like to pursue. So I think it
Sorry
should
to
be
interrupt, sir. Sorry to interrupt, but my papers on international law are generally on international criminal law, like wars on Gaza and Israel, particularly focusing on that. That's
right.
why I was asking.
That's okay, because largely what they're looking for is your ability to read and write about the law academically. So I wouldn't worry too much. That by itself wouldn't come in the way of your application, regardless of your interest.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll take the last two questions from Dhriti and Bilal, but Bilal first and then Dhriti.
Am I audible properly?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Thanks for organizing this, by the way. I just wanted to have like this one follow-up question. What I already asked that my degree was over by June 2023. So, but I'm under 27. I'm right now 25. So does this make that's my first UG degree? So will does this make me ineligible for a Rhodes Scholarship for a master's course? That's it.
Unfortunately, yes. Unless your degree was completed on or after 1st October 2023, you will not be eligible. Dhriti.
Hello, hi. So you guys spoke about talking about our essence of the criteria. Can you guys elaborate a little on that? Because there's just a lot to write in like 1,000 words. There's your academics, your qualities, your extracurricular activities. So do we just go on about everything that we have done? Like what is the most effective way to cover everything and to write a successful personal statement?
Dhriti, I will interrupt here and just request you to wait for the work webinar when we discuss how to write your personal and academic statements. But if any of the panelists have very brief thoughts on this question, feel free to share in about 50 seconds. Yeah, that's go ahead.
So there's again, as we discussed already, you will never be able to write everything that you want and everything that you can potentially use to say show that you fulfill the criteria. So a lot of that process is going to be writing, say, 2000 words, figuring out what is most relevant, then rewriting, then rewriting. I think I went through 4 rounds of rewriting, and that's generally what you would end up needing to whittle it down to what you think is the most core and essential parts of who you are and how you think you can best put yourself forward. So there's no like one formulaic answer.
Okay, that makes
But
sense.
yeah,
Thank you.
just don't worry too much
Yeah.
about like what's a good way to do it is just write a lot of it at first so that everything is addressed, and then figure out what is actually important and what is not so important, and then it's fine. Don't worry about ticking every checkbox perfectly.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Great. I mentioned that we'd take only 2 questions, but I'll just make one exception for the hand that's up. Shadia, you have the last question.
Sorry, I have a very quick question. So basically, I have done my graduation, like undergraduate, on 2022. So I'm doing my master's right now in international relations. So my course I did in undergraduate is quite different from what I'm doing right now, which is journalism, psychology, and English literature, which was a triple major. So, like, is it necessary I have to collect this LOR from undergraduate? And so, is there any option like I can take it from my master professors as well?
Yeah. You can get all your references from your master's professors if you want. Like, it just needs to be academic references. I think yeah, all of my references were master's professors because I was also in my master's degree. So you can pick and choose. So it can either be all undergrad, or all masters, or you can do 2+1, whatever you feel is best reflects your ability. And yeah, depending on what courses you think are relevant to what you're applying for. And second, what courses you did well in, you have a wider set of courses to choose from because you would have done 2 sets of courses in the undergrad and the master's.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. I'm planning to do in on MA International Relations, so I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we have answered quite a lot of questions today, and I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned from the experiences of our panelists on how to navigate especially the 4 selection criteria. There are still a lot of questions in chat as well as in Q&A about the formal eligibility criteria in relation to particular courses as well as age. Unfortunately, we will not be able to give you definitive answers on those, and I highly encourage you to go to the Rhodes Scholarship website and go through the tool, the eligibility checker tool that I put in chat. It's a very simple tool. It gives you an answer to all your questions of eligibility in like 5 minutes. Are you eligible? It will ask you a few questions. If you say yes to those questions, you are eligible. If you say no to any of those, unfortunately, you are not eligible. And that applies to both the academic requirements as well as the age requirements. Now, there are also a lot of questions around LORs that are unanswered in chat. We're going to discuss those at a subsequent webinar in how to choose a referee, who to get your references from and whatnot. There are also a lot of questions about what to include in the CV, how to include things in the CV and how to prioritize these things for the Rhodes Scholarship. And that's something that we're going to discuss tomorrow, which will be our webinar number 2, writing your CV for the Rhodes Scholarship. Now, of course, there are different ways of writing a CV, and we will try and get as many experiences from the panelists as possible to help you get a sense of how to write your CV for this scholarship. Thank you so much, Ritika, Daksh, and Ayan, and everybody for joining us today. Once again, I hope this was helpful, and I hope you will be able to join us tomorrow. This meeting was recorded, this webinar was recorded, and we will keep you posted about where you will find the recording. We're just figuring out, whether it will go on the Rhodes Secretariat India YouTube or on the Project EduAccess YouTube. But if you're following Project EduAccess on any of the social media, you will get to know where to find all of these recordings. With that, thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, evening, night, depending on where you are. And we'll see you tomorrow with webinar number 2. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.